All right, welcome to another Fuel the Conversation, a podcast for fuel people by fuel people. We are your hosts, Freddie Riddler and Kyle Sheehan, and I always start off by asking Kyle, it's cold, it's windy, it's blowing, it's just miserable outside, but how are we doing inside the office?
Oh, it's nice and toasty in the office. Some cinnamon rolls for breakfast this morning. Yeah, you can't beat it. And, by the time this podcast finally airs, I'll probably be a father to child number 3. We're counting down days. I missed the office pool. I was wrong. I went with my wife and said it's going to be a little early, the 10th, and we're past that by a couple days. So I already lost that bet. So,
well, funny story. You could be getting a text anytime during this podcast that you got to go.
Yeah, I could. So if you see me get up and leave on video, everybody knows where I went for that scenario.
Awesome. Who do we got today on our podcast, Kyle?
Today we have a very valued partner, and I'm going to call him a very close friend to RCC, Semon with Singularis IT. Semon, you started your career. You've worked both in the corporate structure. You've worked for multi-generational family businesses, handling IT. You've helped grow companies throughout the years before finally saying, I think I'm ready to go and start my own venture. And you started your own venture called Singularis IT that offers cloud hosting solutions and IT services to companies all across the United States. And our partnership began with you many, many years ago. And I'm going to give a shout out to Jason Buto. Jason, if you're listening, this is a shout out and a massive thank you to you. You're the one that made these introductions and this partnership happen between our two organizations. When we started our cloud venture, I believe all the way back in 2014 or 2015, Jason can yell at me later for missing that date. We originally hosted all of our own servers in-house, and we used you guys to partner with to have a real-time cutover in case something were to happen to our Minnesota location. And as we built in that partnership and we started to realize how big this product could get to the service that we offered, we say, okay, well, let's go to somebody that actually does that for a living. And we moved everybody over to you, and you guys are now our primary cloud provider, and we just hold backups now. So with that, can you explain a little bit about your position at Singularis, when it started, a little background on yourself?
Yeah. So, thank you guys for the introductions and also allowing me to join in on this. Looking forward to it and always willing to jump in and have a conversation with you guys at all times, right? I mean, because this is really what this is going to be. So I'm Semon Dorgam, the CEO of Singularis IT. I started the company approximately 13 years ago, give or take. Sometimes it kind of blends in depending on when you actually think about it. But my oil and gas experience has been 20 to 24, almost about 24 years now. So I started as really just a bench network admin at a very old publicly traded company that was just in sheer acquisition mode, and learned the ropes there, learned how to pump and print, learned how to pull hose, learned how the CSR role, the dispatcher role, what it really means for heating factors and everything in that sense. Because despite that fact that my beard kind of makes me look like Santa Claus in a sense today, back then, I was younger and was able to basically, just learn it all. And I really thank those guys that brought me into that industry, or in this industry and allowed me to learn all that, because it really kind of took me into this level of where we are today. And jumping a little forward to today is, we're a managed hosting company and a managed services company. We have, obviously, RCC is one of our largest partners. We are their, systems engineers, their admins, they're pretty much their security guys, their infrastructure guys. But yet, even though there's the company name of Singularis IT, we really, it's just one company when it comes to their environment, their solutions, their services. And that's kind of really the whole gist of, who we are and the partnership and relationship, that we have. And we care about nothing but, really the keeping everybody online, keeping them secure, keeping them safe, and more importantly, the aspect of, we don't want it to be a problem for you. We want you guys to really grow the software, grow the business, make it the leader in your space and what you guys want to do and how you want to do it. And then in return, allow your companies, your customers, to just do their job and deliver gas and make money. I mean, that's kind of that's really what we really strive for, is the guys in the back just pushing it forward. And then also holding it together so it doesn't go backwards, in that sense. So, but that's where we are today.
So if people are watching this and listening, you might see some little gaps in our video here. And I think we're having some intermittent internet issues. And Semon gave a pretty cool fact. This just goes to show how in tune you have to be, because it's not always an issue necessarily where your servers are located, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's all the way down into wherever that individual is located. And Semon, I'd love for you to share what you kind of just shared with me and Freddie about some of the internet issues that you've had due to the storms.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, the Northeast right now, actually, majority of the country recently, on the eastern side, really got hit with two back-to-back storms, and we're about to get hit with a third one, in that sense. And as the water, table continues to rise, and flooding and so on and so forth, just causes problems for above ground wiring and underground wiring, and offices for your internet service providers, for your local carriers, and just power in general, in that sense. So, us being obviously very heavily involved with the oil and gas industry, let's face it, 80 to 90%, I don't know if that's an accurate number, but I'm just going to throw that out there, but a lot more than just one, has your services and your support and your servicing areas are in rural parts of the country, and therefore you may or may not have the connectivity or the power grid backup systems as like New York City or Philadelphia or whatever. So smaller pockets of town like where we live in as well, if you have a power grid problem, or one of the power grids, you're knocking out thousands of people, in that sense, which then causes an intermittent, internet problem too, depending on where your carrier, like over here in the Lehigh Valley, RCN is one of or now they're called Astound. Astound is one of the predominant, cable modem for business and home providers. If they have a power grid issue in the area, they may get the power restored, but it doesn't mean that their connectivity is back online. There could be something downstream down in Philadelphia, because that's where they're routing to. So for us in the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania, Bethlehem, Allentown, Easton area, to get to, majority of the space in Virginia, we're being routed through Philadelphia. And then from Philadelphia to somewhere else in Chicago, in Virginia, and so on and so forth. If Philadelphia is having a major problem in terms of connectivity and problems from the geographical Mother Nature aspect of things, we're naturally going to have an upstream and a downstream problem. Mm-hmm. In our data center and our connectivity at Singularis IT, we kind of wanted to really build a design to proof around that, essentially. So we have 3 different carriers that are peered with just about every single internet service provider that is in the nation, and they're they're in the top 8, I would say, definitely top 10 in terms of providers and the most interconnected. And we have them all bonded together. So all 3 are essentially, best in, best out. We don't really route it. We don't force it. And where we can force it and route it is when we notice problems like this in the past couple of days, where we noticed that one of the carriers who's peered with a lot of the home internet, specifically toward in the New York and northern part of the East Coast, we ended up dropping that entire packet stream because we noticed that they were having peering issues or connectivity issues to essentially find the best route. So by us denouncing the IP space and the traffic map, we then force that carrier to say, hey, they're no longer peering with one of our peers, go the other way. and that other way was a lot better. So therefore, it allowed you to have that consistent connection, in that sense. So one of the reasons why, when we designed this, you guys jumped on it right away, is because it gives, your customers that consistency and that flexibility, because it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this, and it's ongoing. It's the regulatory, these certifications for security and whatnot. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot to do. That's one of the reasons why we have our data centers in the two most interconnected areas of the country as well, because of that.
So when things aren't working, don't yell at the IT guys. It could be something else.
So to put that into kind of, I'm going to say Kyle terms, which is, let's bring it down maybe 15 levels here. It's essentially what you're saying there is, if you have an internet connection issue in Pennsylvania, a user in California is not going to see a repercussion of that, because you're able to switch and move those connections coming in and going out, so they don't have that issue. But you're not in control if the state of California shuts their power down and you can't turn your computer off or on, right?
Correct. Yep.
Which is a main reason why we have Mogo tablets out in the field too, where that key point of delivery, or what I call lifeblood of your company, doesn't stop work just because your power is out in California. But since you have our Mogo Live server in your control, in your environment, as long as they have a cellular connection, the cell towers aren't down, they can still sync updated data and be able to get their trucks off on the road, which is a huge benefit to being on the cloud.
Yep. Yeah. And the nice thing is, because of our, services, our support, our experience, and kind of like what we do have a lot of clients that actually ask us, how do they have a real dual, internet service provider setup? Because let's face it, your oil and gas, customers can have either a propane, generation backup or whatever for their facility, which is awesome, but they may not have an internet provider, backup as well. So just because, your facility or your area loses internet or loses power, which by a telephone, somebody hits a telephone pole, whatever happens, right? I mean, you got to wait for somebody else to fix something. You can bring your building back online. Then it's like, okay, I have no internet. Now you just have a building with power. You can't really do much with it. You can't connect to the cloud, in that sense. So, therefore, the best thing to do is, we can work with, your customers and you guys to provide I would say a secondary, what we call as an out of band internet connection. And that will essentially be just another modem in your office that is connected to one of our cell companies, and that provides your entire office internet. So therefore, and it automatically switches and fails over as long as there's actual power, to the appliance. So a lot of companies actually do that, in today, and actually your Mogo trucks do that too. They're when they're in the office, they're connected to the Wi-Fi. That's their primary band, and their secondary band is whatever internet service provider, their cell carrier that they're using out in the field. So if you think about it, your Mogo trucks are doing that today. It's probably a good idea to set up your office to do that too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So Semon, earlier in the podcast, you talked about your, experience in the propane industry. I want to bring that up. You talked about learning to pull the hose, deliver gallons, worked with CSRs, watch them do the data entry. All of that data is really important stuff that they should really back up and keep secure. You lose that, you lose your company. And with your Singularis company, we use cloud hosting. So our viewers, our listeners right now, talk a little bit about what you do with RCC when it comes down to cloud hosting and the security measures that go into that to keep that data secure.
Yeah. So, like your setup for RCC really is one of our enterprise setups, in the realm of, online upkeep security, and really just an overall holistic aspect of things. All of your servers are multi-redundant, within our environment. The data is being backed up in 3 different forms and 3 different repositories and 3 different setups. It's really that beyond that true 3-to-1 solution, it's kind of like a 3-to-1 plus 1, basically, because of the setups that we have designed and architected for your customers that are hosting today. I'd strongly encourage, just on that nature alone, that's a huge reason why somebody should host, in the RCC's, cloud environment that has the RCC software.
Mm-hmm.
The cost of that is massive and monumental, but because the nice thing is RCC has sheer numbers, it's very affordable. To add that to for somebody to do that separately would be to hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the uptime and the reaction time and response time you guys have set up today, that we have set up today for you. Also, the security aspect of things. We have full blown EDR, which is the enhanced detection response system, with our managed antivirus that we have put on there for you guys. We also have what's called an XDR, which is actually a next generation AI level style, enhanced detection and monitoring system and software solution, where it actually does a significantly better job and is one of the leaders in ransomware for protection against ransomware and other crypto events. That's all a basic aspect and actually all a part of every single RCC cloud hosted server today. So you get the one of the top level style of securities, for your clients, and then you also get the recovery aspect of three different measures. One is a continuous 2x45 day backups, where it's 2 points a day, specific based on your time zones in the middle of your work days, and they're hosted off for 45 days. Secondly, we're also doing specific file level backups in 2 points, and that's being hosted to another one of our data centers as well. And then lastly, we're also taking your entire environment and replicating it down to the millisecond to our other data center in Chicago. And that is actually also considered as a off-cycle backup if we need it, because we hold the data there for 48 hours. So we can recover data, that RCC and Singularis have designed for your customers, that, and Jason and I have really, really kind of we took off both our company hats off, and we put on I'm a large oil and gas company. What do I want to see if I'm going to pay for something? And what's the best thing to do to provide that, that AmeriGas style, money in that they have to spend, but in a more budgeted fashion for, the mom and pop company. And this is essentially what we've designed together is that really tri-headed monster on the blocking side and on the recovery side. So therefore you kind of get best of both worlds, and you can function completely within.
That's awesome. That is really cool to hear all that out there too, and the service that and the security and safety measures that we put in place for our customer base. And we still have a large portion of our customer base that likes to do it themselves, likes to do it in-house. There might be a sense of control, a sense of technology is still fairly new in the whole scope of humanity, and I don't really trust it kind of thing. Numerous factors in there. And one of the big selling points that we have for companies when they're looking at cost of cloud, versus other providers, our partnership with you, or doing it themselves, is the cost savings on servers and maintenance. And back when RCC started, a computer might last you 15 to 20 years, right? They built them like brick houses. You'd think Nokia phone, you throw it off a building, it's going to still survive and I can use it forever. Today, what, in your professional opinion, how often, if you're maintaining your own server and have your own hardware, how often should you be looking at replacing and upgrading those components, maybe not as a whole, but even as parts and pieces of the server, to make sure it's in compliance, make sure that you're running the best that you can so that your software doesn't have adverse complications to running and different things like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, Kyle. If you want to err on the side of having the most reliability and the best uptime to kind of keep your business consistent, I would say 3 years. You start looking at replacing particular gear, particular hardware upgrade cycles at year 2.5, and then you put it into place at year 3. Can you stretch it to 5 years? Yeah, You can, but you're going to start seeing potentially some really diminishing returns after that, based on performance or based on, just the generational aspect of the growth of technology and data, and just, the aspects of just inflation of within the company of practices and processes and procedures. If you kind of think about it, when phones used to be, that like a cell phone, I mean, with updates and with patches and a lot more bad actors that are trying out there to get you and do things to you, causes these updates to happen, which ultimately goes downstream to kind of force you to upgrade things, to have a better, better security, better solutions, better services to keep you online. You're constantly having to buy a new phone every 2 years. I mean, can you stretch your iPhone, or your Android phone out to 3 or 4 years? You can, but you might not be able to install or run the software that you want to, that you were using last month, because they've advanced it. So it's kind of really, it all rolls a little bit downhill, unfortunately. So that's kind of why I always say the 3-year plan is the best plan, because, you're always going to be, essentially, you're not in the most cutting edge technology, which you don't need to be, and you're not left behind either to make some major capital investments. If you can identify how to quantify and budget it, correctly and accordingly, it could be a constant, I would say, refresh cycle. Those are things that we do, today for clients that are not hosted at Singularis IT, but maybe they just bought a server a year or two ago, but they want to move to the cloud at some point. We can put together, a package that can utilize the security side of things and the recovery side of things, but also the natural transition to move to the cloud in 2 or 3 years. So that way, then they didn't waste their capital expenditure, in that sense. So that way, then it's a trajectory forward, for them. So we've shifted a little bit of focus toward that in the past 18 months, to kind of be able to assist those companies, because back in the COVID, back when COVID was around and et cetera, I mean, people were spending a lot of money on things, and they might have spent a lot of money on upgrading hardware or having it laying around. I'm a firm believer of, don't waste it, try to use it, but use it within an ample time that, it's, don't stretch it out longer than it really should be. Because it really shouldn't. And when you start thinking that way, that will cause you guys and cause anybody really problems down the line of an outage and how long it takes to recover from that. One thing I always find, Kyle, and I'm kind of going off on a different direction here, but most companies don't know what it costs them if they're down for an hour or a couple hours. Most companies don't know. And
they don't know that risk associated with that, right? I'm definitely a big risk person. I've been pounded in my head since I was a young age. You're going to make some really dumb decisions as you grow, but a lot of that is the situation and all the smaller decisions you made until you got to that point, right? Same kind of thing in IT and tech. It's all those little decisions that you made up until that point. You didn't really know the risk that you were putting yourself into. And then all of a sudden that last domino falls and the risk realization is much too late to perform action on.
Yeah, the crazy thing is, a lot of people, there's pros and cons, right, to having cloud hosted or self-hosted. But there's also an argumentable, feature where why cloud hosting, or I would say remote hosting, is better. One, it can expand and contract with your business. If you have some great years, then you're basically paying for your usage with those great years. But we all saw it in COVID. Certain industries did not have great years during that time. If they just spent thousands of dollars upgrading their system the year prior, and all of a sudden they're cutting their workforce in half, well, now what? Your gear doesn't last longer because you have your workforce in half. It still lasts the same amount of time. Mm-hmm. With remote hosting or cloud hosting, like with a company like us, we can contract the resources back to accommodate your business today. So if you had 20 users, tomorrow, and then the next day you only have 10, we can reduce the resources and you're only going to pay for those 10 resources. So therefore, switching the model and the mindset, it's all a business decision. It's moving toward an operational expenditure versus a capital expenditure. I personally would rather see you spend the capital expenditure on a new truck, on efficiencies, maybe working on the saddles for if your saddles need inspection and upgrading for your 30,000 gallon propane tank or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Adding tank monitors, to become a little more efficient to your clients or your customers and your locations. Those are the things that you should be considering, that the capital of like, if I'm going to spend $100,000, how can I get that $100,000 to generate 120 out of it?
Mm-hmm.
IT and putting in servers, it depreciates immediately, in that sense. And now it's not going to find you an efficient way to do it. It's just.
Yep. So talking down that line a little bit of risk and decision making and weighing options, and there's not necessarily a bad way to go, right? It's just which way do you feel there's less risk? One of the things that we have talked about and the paths that we have gone down with you is we decided to do remote desktop connections, so they're essentially connecting from any PC they want. They connect right up into a new desktop that's running all the applications. You can put extra software if you need it on there, additional tools. Being in the industry that we're in, being a software provider, we've seen lots of different setups, right? And one of the big things that I personally kind of have a question on is, what was the thought process or risk assessment on deciding to go with a remote desktop connection versus like an Azure connection or an Azure virtual desktop through a web browser?
Yep. Yeah. So the nice thing about the remote desktop connection is consistency and security. In that sense, every single one of your employees that are connected to these remote desktop servers will have access to that one place, and everything is consistent. You're kind of, from a supporting perspective, and I would say an uptime perspective, it's easier, for the customer essentially to say, I just got a new user. They need this. We just literally add the user, add the name, it's done and over with. You log in and you share those resources. The nice thing about it is, it's also very consistent. It's all the same for every single one of the users. There's really nothing very different. Where Freddie's desktop and, Kyle, your desktop or mine, we all have the same piece of software, the same version, the same everything. So that way then the company is moving forward as one, or staying exactly where it needs to be as one, instead of having one outlier here, another one here, so on and so forth here. I mean, if you remember back in the day of the Excel versions, the older version of Excel versus the newer version of Excel, and so on and so forth. And what happened, when you had an old version that you opened up and you couldn't open it on the, so on and so forth. The remote desktop solution and the remote singular fashion like that really eliminates that. And then it takes the guesswork out of the end user wondering, am I on the most up-to-date thing, or is Sally doing something different, in that sense. So that's kind of the whole gist of it, is really moving the company together as one, not just, one here, one there.
Yeah. Good conversations, good topics, Semon. Thank you so much. For time constraints, we could probably sit and talk to you for another 3 or 4 hours, but we like to keep our podcasts within a certain range. So I want to finish off with just one more quick question. It's always fun to finish these off with a little bit of laughter, even though the company that experienced this probably is not laughing. But being in your position, what is one of the scariest IT moments that a company has ever had to go through that you had to be part of?
Oh man. Let's see. Never forget this. I I get a phone call from the one CEO. He was a principal of a company, and they're still a client today. They're actually one of our oldest clients, that we have, and they're long-term friends as well. He calls me up, and then he says, "Hey, Semon, I think I might have just clicked on something, and all of a sudden everything just started moving." and we joke around a lot, and it was literally after, I'm a diehard Eagles fan, even though we're absolutely terrible right now, and I don't think we deserve where we are today in the NFL world, but it is what it is. He is their team is in the NFC East as well, and we just happened to play them, basically earlier in the morning, and he sends me and we whooped them. So I thought he was messing around at first, and giving me some problems, and some shit, if I could say that, I guess. But he ended up called me up and said, no, seriously, I literally clicked on something, and all of a sudden things were just being deleted, and all of everything is just logged in, and so on and so forth. And I'm like, okay, well, can you just FaceTime me real quick? Because I don't want to compromise, my system if it was, or if he was joking, I could read the face right away. I mean, eyes don't lie, right? So therefore, the minute he popped on FaceTime, I knew he was 100% serious, and the look in his face, and I was like, oh, okay, this is a oh shit moment.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
and literally they had a vulnerability issue on a code deployment that was just completely accidental, and it was not intentional. It was nothing in that sense of that they wrote bad code or whatever. They were literally just stress testing something, and it accidentally got pushed in a release that it shouldn't have been. And next thing you know, he was testing it, and it opened up a flood. Now, luckily, it wasn't anybody. It wasn't a bad actor. It was a bot, in that sense. But the bots, these bad acting bots are meant to look like, somebody doing something, and it's essentially sending information back. So we actually ended up having to. It was a very long night, and we ended up having to basically black hole. One of the hardest decisions I ever had to make for a company, and even a friend. And I flat out had to say, buddy, we have to shut you down until further notice, and that's difficult to do. As the authoritative, and systems administrator here, it's a very difficult decision. And his comment, because of our trust, our relationship, and who we are, I said to him, I said, we should shut it down for the night. Let's reevaluate it first thing in the morning, and let's talk about damage control and what we need to do to get you back online in that sense. So we essentially worked through the late into the night, early into the morning, came up with a solution that essentially what we were going to do is we identified his actual clients that need to hit the server, for them to conduct and continue business that next morning and the remaining portion of the day. We found their IP sources, and we only white labeled those IP sources, so that way then they conducted business that day. But we shut that server down, and then we ended up redeveloping and re-engineering the environment in 48 hours, and helping them really stand up a new environment, and moving forward. Quite frankly, we most likely saved their business. With that fast acting, scary moment.
I like what you
in place.
Yeah, and I like what you do. I've seen you do this here too, and I heard Jason talk about this all the time, Semon. Not only do you guys, find the problem, fix the problem, but then you innovate ideas of how will this never happen again? What can we put in place to stop this from happening again? And that's a business relationship that we value the most, because you're always looking ahead. You're never stalling out on, okay, things are going pretty good now, so I can just sit back, right? No, this is good, but now I got to keep looking towards the future. Just like our call we just had now, we had that where the internet popped out and we had to restart our podcast. And you're like, okay, this is what's happening in the world right now, and this is what we're putting in place to help with this type of stuff. So it's always a great conversation to have with you, Semon, when we're talking about these types of things.
So I know we're getting a little past our time here with some technical issues and everything else, but I did, if you have some time, Simone, had one more topic I'd kind of like to talk about, and I know that we're gonna have a little longer podcast, but I think this is a very important one to cover.
Yeah.
There's been a new buzzword coming into the propane industry and into tech the last, well, I'd say about 4 or 5 years, and this buzzword is actually approaching its 70th birthday. Our artificial intelligence was a term coined, I believe, like 1956. So by
Mm-hmm.
any means, it's not a new phenomenon. It just has some public facing, available sites and software pieces that you can get in, and now giving access to the general public into these artificial intelligence
Mm-hmm.
platforms. How do you feel artificial intelligence is going to impact our industry of propane? And since we kind of collaborate on tech and software, our industries of tech and software in the coming years?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's going to impact us in some way, definitely. The question is how, and on what degree from, I would say, from a employment standpoint. It's not going to be able to take, positions away from CSRs and to answer phones and so on and so forth. I don't think that's ever really going to be the case, because being in a service industry, there's only so much you can do, with those automated responses, right? There definitely needs to be some humanization into it, in that sense. But where it is going to help you is like that XDR, higher level next generation security services that we have installed, on the RCC servers. Is what it is doing. It is doing machine learning, and it is doing user learning and whatnot. So therefore, it's identifying and seeing that, hey, wait a minute, this user does this every single day, and these are the softwares that you open up every single day, and here's the paths, here's the sizes. If that all of a sudden goes out of scope, AI is looking at that, and the software is looking at that and saying, wait a minute, this could be a potential problem. Let's start raising red flags, let's get people involved, and so on and so forth. Or as even as egregious as, actually, I'm going to black hole that user, so that way then they can't connect to anything, and I'm shutting that user down and suspending it in time. So that way the engineers and the security guys can come in and fix it and bring you back online. That is where I think AI is going to be extremely beneficial across the entire board. In that sense, and kind of go from there. But if you really think about it, I mean, AI has been used, in our softwares for quite some time. It's been used in your systems today, in your day-to-day life, every single day. I mean, majority of everyone has a smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Siri. There. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of
Google.
it. I mean, everyone's also experienced it at some point. If everyone remembers the little paperclip from Microsoft Office, you know, that was a little
Yeah.
bit of AI. If you
Yeah.
think about it. Yep.
Yep.
and so, I mean, therefore, I do think it's going to impact us, just as a whole, across multiple industries, but specifically for the oil and gas industry. I do think it's going to be a major benefit to allow you to route better, to deliver a lot safer, maybe add an extra stop or two a day, to be able to essentially generate, a few more gallons, for the month, for the quarter, for the year, to be able to hedge better, so that way then you can get better pricing, from the terminals, to be able to have, a better price per gallon for yourself. Um,
Yep.
that's where I say definitely don't ignore it, and encourage it. Ride the wave a little bit. Um,
Yep.
you don't got to be a
It's an
surfer, but you
infant.
can ride a boogie board.
Part of
Mm.
artificial intelligence is it has to learn, right? You have to provide it with the information to learn and the data plots to learn. And I always say it with a little bit of caution too, right? Is there's a lot of that AI going around as a buzzword, and
Hmm.
this is what it is, but don't confuse that with human written code. That is efficient and is already there. This is the tool to help supplement that. It's not there to replace. It's not there to replace
Mhm.
the human. It's not there to replace the code. It's not there to replace the mathematics behind things. It's here to find trends. It's here to tell you, hey, this could be more efficient. Noticing that you go to this area every single week. And by the way, this customer comes up every 3 weeks. And, it's parts of the package that have done that for years and years and years using mathematics. This really is not the replacement to that. This is the enhancement, or could potentially be the enhancement to that.
I would say it's the next generation, aspect of things. And it can go at anyone's pace, right? I mean, if you don't want to be an early adopter, you don't have to be. I mean, let's face it, you can still pump and print today if you had to. I mean, to be able to deliver gas, you still can do that. Is it efficient? No, but you can still do it. So, I mean, or you can be full electronic and not have to do any of that. I mean, it just is what it is. So I would say embrace whatever, is best for their business to deliver gas efficiently, safely, and to be able to grow. If you can grow a net gallon every single day, the next thing you know, you're net 365 gallons for the year. Multiply that by every single person, it adds up.
Sure does. Yep.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Semon. I appreciate your time today. And sorry it took forever to record such a small podcast with all the
worries.
Internet issues. We'll just blame Jason. I heard Kyle say that before, so we'll do it again. Well, thanks a lot, Semon. Real quick, if somebody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to do it? You got some contact information for them other than talking to sales@rccbi.com. How can they get a hold of you, Semon?
Very simple. I mean, you can just call our toll-free number, 866-617-2426. Just ask for me, Semon, or ask for anybody in the company. They'll be able to direct you, and just let them reference the RCC podcast and RCC in general, and we'll know exactly where it's at and where it's from, and we'll go from there. But really, the best way, honestly, is going to be through you guys as well. Good.
Well, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Semon.
Have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thank you too. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining Kyle and Freddie's podcast, Fuel the Conversation.
A podcast for fuel people by fuel people. We really hope you enjoyed today's topics and you found them interesting, and we hope that you pulled some value out of our conversation today.
To hear more podcasts from Kyle, myself, and special guests, you can catch us on Spotify, Amazon Music, or the iTunes Store.
To find out more information on RCC, you can visit our website, www.rccbi.com. You can also find us on Facebook under Rural Computer Consultants, also under LinkedIn under Rural Computer Consultants, or go ahead and give us a follow on Twitter at RCCInc79.
If you'd like to contact us directly, email us at sales@rccbi.com.
This is Kyle signing off.
And this is Freddie.
Until next time.